A lot can happen in 96 hours. This is the incredible story of how American colonists went from disagreeing on the question of independence to supporting it unanimously and approving Jefferson's Declaration of Independence all within 96 hours. Now, we're going to start on July 1st, 1776. This is decision day. This is the day the Second Continental Congress has set for the vote on independence. John Dickinson, who is a delegate from Pennsylvania, is sitting in his wooden chair with his palms sweaty. Now, just a couple years ago, this guy was one of the most famous Americans in the world, known as a revolutionary leader, a rock star, a hero, right? But today, July 1st, 1776, John Dickinson is about to destroy his reputation. And he knows it, right? He has become one of the leaders in the vote and the movement against independence. And so Dickinson stands up from his wooden chair and he tries to convince the Second Continental Congress not to declare independence. He says, look, guys, we have no money, no allies, no military, no government. We're going to get crushed by Great Britain, right? And by the way, even if somehow we manage to win this war, we're going to have to borrow so much money from other countries to fight it that in the end, we're just going to be controlled by another foreign country. It's just not going to be Great Britain. It'll be someone else. And who's to say that these 13 colonies, okay, that we're not going to fall apart, start fighting amongst ourselves at some point? This is just not a good idea. He says, this is not the right time and it's not the right move. We should not vote for independence. Now, he says it much more artfully than that. And it's worth spending 90 seconds to listen to his speech or parts of his speech. It actually survives to this day. His actual handwritten speech survives to this day, and it's worth listening to. So he says, gentlemen, my conduct this day, I expect will give the finishing blow to my once great and now much diminished popularity. Yet I had rather forfeit popularity forever than vote away the blood and happiness of my countrymen. Independence will not strengthen us by one man, nor by the least supply, but it may expose our soldiers to additional cruelties and outrages. The full fury of British wrath will be unleashed. Indians will be loosed on the frontier. Negroes will rise up to slaughter us. New York may well be destroyed. By their own admission, the advocates of separation say foreign assistance will be necessary. At what cost? Let us imagine a war without victors. When the guns fall silent, many will have bled and sacrificed, only to have exchanged the light yoke of Great Britain for the heavy dominion of a foreign power. Some have argued that America will become one great commonwealth. But what is to keep 13 unwieldy colonies from splitting asunder? I have a strong impression in my mind that this will take place. Oh, gentlemen, to escape the protection of Great Britain by declaring independence, unprepared as we are, would be to brave a storm in a skiff made of paper. Now, Dickinson is actually a brilliant writer, and he's able to stitch together this really powerful, almost poetic speech against independence. No one else is able to do that on July 1st, but Dickinson is not the only guy in the room ready to vote against independence. So when the vote is taken, here's how it works. Each colony gets one vote. Regardless of how many delegates it has at the Continental Congress, each colony gets one vote. They take the vote, and most colonies support independence, some of them with a split vote. But there are a few colonies that refuse to go along, and they vote against independence. Pennsylvania, led by John Dickinson and Robert Morris, who's actually the richest guy in America, they vote against independence by a vote of 4-3. Benjamin Franklin is actually on the losing side of that vote. So that's Pennsylvania. South Carolina, led by a 25-year-old guy named Edward Rutledge, they vote against independence. And then Delaware only has 2 delegates at the Continental Congress on July 1st, and they're split. One supports independence, one does not. And so they can't support independence. Now, technically, there are enough votes there to move this thing forward and declare independence anyway, right? But Edward Rutledge, the 25-year-old guy from South Carolina who voted against independence, he says, "Well, wait a second. Maybe we should just vote again tomorrow." And the Continental Congress agrees. Edward Rutledge spends that night convincing the South Carolina delegation to switch their vote. Says, "Look, guys, I know it's not what we wanted, but it's going to happen anyway. And if it happens, we should all be unified on this thing," right? So July 2nd rolls around. They take a new vote on independence. And this time, South Carolina switches its vote and supports independence. Pennsylvania, they also support independence. That story is actually pretty simple. John Dickinson and Robert Morris, they just stay home. They don't show up to work that day. They don't go to the Continental Congress. And that allows Pennsylvania to support independence by a vote of 3-2. This time, Benjamin Franklin's on the winning side of the vote. And Delaware's actually an interesting story. Remember, they only had 2 delegates there on July 1st, right? And they were split. One was for, one was against. Well, there was actually a 3rd delegate who was still stuck in Delaware on July 1st. He couldn't make it in on time. And so he gets a message on July 1st that Delaware is not supporting independence, right? These guys can't agree, they're split. And so this guy named Caesar Rodney, he hops on his horse and he rides all night through a thunderstorm until he gets to the Pennsylvania State House the following morning, July 2nd, just in time for the vote. One of the delegates actually recalls later that he met Caesar Rodney at the door in his boots and spurs. John Adams actually would later say that Caesar Rodney was the oddest looking man in the world. but this guy helped change the course of American history. It was his midnight ride that allowed the vote for independence on July 2nd to be unanimous. Then 2 days later, there was another unanimous vote supporting the Declaration of Independence. Now, after the Declaration of Independence, the war just rages on. It continues raging on. John Dickinson, actually, who voted against independence, and by the way, refused to sign the Declaration of Independence, he goes off and he volunteers for the Continental Army, becoming a general and helping fight the British and prove his loyalty to the American cause. But those next couple years after independence are pretty brutal. I mean, they're not easy years. George Washington, who's leading the Continental Army, has some really tough losses and finds himself a couple times against the ropes. I mean, having a really tough time to the point where some people in the Continental Congress start questioning whether he's the right guy and start trashing him a little bit. And George Washington, at one point just offers to resign, right? So these are really tough times following the Declaration of Independence. They're really going to test George Washington and his men in extraordinary ways. But we're going to talk about that in the next video.